Welcome back to another episode of The Sweet Spot. This is John Sherman from the Four Foundations of Golf. And as always, I'm joined by
Adam from Adam Young Golf. I have to enunciate this correctly at the moment because I noticed that when we've got our new YouTube channel up, so look for the Sweet Spot Golf Podcast at the Sweet Spot Golf Podcast on YouTube, and you can actually watch some of these things. And it gives you subtitles. And yeah, when I was saying Adam Young Golf, it was saying Adam Ian, Adam Ian. It wasn't, yeah, it wasn't doing it properly. So
got to
I
enunciate
will,
it.
yes, everything
I
correctly.
thought you were I thought you were stressing it because you want to feel like younger, like I'm young. I'm young.
Well, yeah, I got another birthday coming up soon, so yeah, need to feel that.
They keep coming. Also, a reminder, we're plugging this. We'll plug this for the next few episodes, but we have a listener survey. We've been doing this show for 4+ years. Adam and I always have tons of ideas, but we want to make sure that we're covering the topics and the questions that are important to all of you. Plenty of people have filled it out, but really quick, all we literally want you to do is just type a question or a topic on there. You can sign up for either my or Adam's weekly email, where we also give valuable golf information. But go to adamyounggolf.com/survey
Survey, yes.
service. If that makes sense. We'll also, the link is in the show notes, but literally it will take you 30 seconds if you have your idea. So we'd appreciate that. We love hearing from everyone. So what are we talking about today, Adam?
Well, I'm steamrolling this one, unfortunately, because I thought we were going to do some back and forths, but you said, no, take the reins on this. So it's a 10-year anniversary of the practice manual, the book I wrote in a little apartment in Spain when no one had any idea who I was. I didn't know who I was either, but this book that I thought would just be read by my mother and no one else has been read by 100,000 people now. And yeah, I literally didn't write it with that in mind. It was just, right, what are my thoughts? How can I structure them? How can I produce something that might help the golf industry or introduce new concepts to the golf industry or take concepts that are just on the cutting edge and push them more forwards. For golf instructors mainly was the idea, but I think most people who have read it, I don't think there are 100,000 golf instructors out there, so it's just been regular golfers. So yeah, I'm going to take some ideas from the practice manual. We
Well,
can just
congrats on the 10 years.
summarize
I
it.
mean, just so people understand, like most people don't know anything about the book industry, and I kind of don't know much myself, but when I released my book, I started talking to some people in the industry, just asking questions. Most nonfiction books are considered a success if they sell between like 1,500 to 2,500 copies in the first year. So any small, medium-sized publisher would be like, "Oh yeah, that was good." Like they just like it in their back catalog. But that's, most books, you can go on Amazon, there's millions of books on there. Most of them don't sell because it's just very hard to stick out in the crowd. So 100,000 copies is incredible. That's like top 0.5%, I'm going to guess. And also, when I first found out about your stuff and I saw your book, it definitely motivated me. It took me a while, it took me many years after that, but it motivated me to collect my thoughts and put it into a book. Congrats on that. It's you've helped a lot of golfers shoot better scores, practice more effectively. Decade is crazy. It's gone by.
Yeah, yeah, I can't believe how much it's changed my life as well. Moving to America and yeah, having the ability to do what we do at the moment. So it's given me a little bit of freedom away from the lesson tee to be able to produce content otherwise to help even more people. So it's great. The irony is, as a introvert, which is what I am, a severe introvert. That's why I wrote the book, to kind of stay behind and out of the picture. I wanted to be the content and the information that was the star. So yeah, it's unfortunately it's thrust me into a situation where now I'm on YouTube as well and people can see my face. So getting used to it slowly,
Like
but
and
yeah,
subscribe. It's
yeah.
so. Oh, also, some of the listeners to our show replied to my latest video saying it's so addicting, which I thought was hilarious. It's so addicting, YouTube. Good thumbnail idea. All right. So what do
Oh,
we?
that one, yeah,
Yeah, it's
I
so
missed the reference for a
yeah.
while there, and then
It's
okay,
like
got it.
the top. It's the top. I'm learning about like thumbnail science, but that's one
Yeah,
of the top
this
ones
is
in golf.
addicting. Yeah,
This is addicting. Game changer is another one.
you won't believe
Full
this.
disclosure, I'm playing the game also. I'm definitely using. You have to
Yeah,
just
we
with
were
books.
discussing before this.
Yeah, you have to as a content creator, just so people understand this. I mean, the competition's fiercer than ever to get people's attention, and you do have to put stuff out there that grabs someone's attention, and then hopefully give them the goods after that. So, yeah, I've had to be a little creative and clickbaity with my thumbnails and titles to try and entice people to click because there's thousands of other videos I'm competing against. So this is so addicting and game changer. On that note, what are the game changing and addicting concepts that you're going to share that will help our listeners?
Well, the first one I'm going to go with is the impact laws. So these are much more widely known now. I know that when I went 10 years ago and I was on Twitter and Facebook and I would ask people about the impact laws, you'd have very few correct answers. Not many people would know what they are or be able to name them all. But, this stemmed from the PGA training that I went through back in kind of 2001, 2004. I think those years, but yeah, so they had five impact laws. I think maybe four. They combined a few. So there was face direction, but that was a combination of the vertical direction. So basically the loft and obviously the left to right orientation. And there would even be lie angle introduced into that. If you're on our YouTube video right now, you can see me moving
You
my
could
hand
finally
weird
see him
ways
moving his
to
yeah, you can finally see him moving his hands around.
Yeah, so basically, for people not watching, if you stick one of those magnetic lie angle tools onto your club face, or imagine just a T coming out straight, what they call it, normal to the face, I think is the scientific term. Then, yeah, there are three factors that go into that. There's the loft component, the lie angle component, and the orientation, thinking of the leading edge, whether that's more open or closed. So that's the face direction. Then you've got the path as well. I think the PGA lumped angle of attack into path because you have path as we know it, in to out, out to in. We also have the vertical component of path as well, whether the club is traveling on a downward path, a level path, or even an upward path. I like to separate those two out just so, we have a little bit more information in there. Then we have the strike. So for PGA, I don't think they talked a lot about the nuances of that, vertical strike, but basically vertical or horizontal, toe or heel was very prominent in the PGA manual. And then we have speed as well. So those cover almost all the things that create what the ball does. For me, I just added ground contact to that, which, could be, I say vertical contact is a proxy for ground contact. If you strike high on the face, there's a very good likelihood that you've hit the ground fat, or you've hit the ground early. It's very difficult to hit high on the face without doing that. And obviously low on the face means no ground contact or ground contact that's too far forwards, so a thin shot. So yeah, I separated those out to create 7 impact laws. And then, through my instruction, through on the lesson tee, the battleground, was noticing a lot that the big three that we talk about, ground contact, and face direction, those were the things that were changing the most for players, and they were changing from shot to shot for the players. So basically, I started to work more on those, and in the practice manual, I had little charts or a little table that had those three things, and you could track which ones were costing you shots. I even gave boundaries of acceptability for people as well, so they could test themselves against, this is what a scratch player would do, this is what a 10 handicap would do. So yeah, just making sure that people understood the ball flight laws, or impact laws rather, knew what to look for, were able to identify them, and then were able to try and find patterns. So that is pretty accepted now. I think we've done a good job of promoting that through the podcast. But you go back 10 years ago and not many people were talking about these things. I think TrackMan and GC Quads and things like that have done a huge job in popularizing these things as well. But
Yeah,
yeah, what are your
but
thoughts on that, John?
I think, regarding the launch monitor discussion, we always get questions on like one of them from the listener survey was, what parameters should I be looking for when I'm using a launch monitor? And I think if you've been listening to this show for a while, hopefully you've become a human launch monitor because you could figure out a lot of this stuff by what you're seeing with your eyes and what you're feeling with your hands. And that's the most important feedback. I'd rather know that my club path was too extreme and my face was too closed intuitively than having to look at it on a launch monitor. I'm not saying to never use a launch monitor. I think there's when you that's one of the reasons why we keep talking about these things is when you understand it well enough to connect it where it's you're naturally like absorbing it as you're hitting golf balls on the course or on the practice range, that's when you can unlock the next level of adjustments where you're hopefully not making the wrong adjustments because you were looking at the wrong thing. You saw your ball slicing to the right and you're trying to implement a fix that's incorrect. It's not true based on the physics of impact. So it I don't want to say it's everything, but it's a lot when you really can internalize this stuff. And you did a great job of it in the book. Cause I remember the first time I read your book and the first time I started coming across the TrackMan stuff on honestly just face angle and the club path relationship. I'm a relatively intelligent person. I'll toot my own horn a bit and I can understand things fairly well. But that took me a while to like understand it well enough that I'd say like the face has to be pointing somewhere between the target line and the club path for a functional draw or fade. Like it took me a while to really understand that and internalize it. I think I knew a little bit about it based on my own golf swing, but yeah, that took me a while to it was confusing at first. And I know it's still confusing to other players and that's why we don't know everyone's level of comprehension who's listening to this. But yeah, when you can become a human launch monitor and understand these things, it's big time information. Simple when you see it, it's simple, but it's not. As I was saying, the first time you come across, or maybe the first 10 times you come across it, it can kind of make your head hurt a bit.
Yeah, well, if you go back, even now, lots of players still think you have to have the club face square to hit good
Yeah, which is
shots. And
horrible advice, really, when you think about it. Unless you're hitting dead straight shots.
yeah, exactly. So most players, I mean, ultimately it comes down to algorithms, right? If the ball's going too far left, you need to do something to open the face. If the ball's going too far right, you need to do something to close the face more. So I don't need to know my numbers. I was in a lesson the other day and a player hit a shot that was on the target and we saw the path number because it was up, but I didn't have the face number up. And he said, "Oh, what was the face on that?" And I was just about to bring it in and I said, "You know what? You don't need to know this. That
Yeah,
ball went
yeah,
on the target. All you
yeah.
need to know is that was good.
That
Repeat it."
felt good. Yeah,
Yeah. Because, it doesn't really help you if you're out on the golf course and the ball goes left and you're like, well, was the face 3 degrees left or 5 degrees left? I mean, you could pull that number up, but all you need to know is you need to make the next one more to the right. And then you
yeah,
need to base
yes,
that on feel, right? Which is,
yeah.
in terms of the human launch monitor that you just talked about, yeah, all you really need is face spray, foot spray rather, and the ball flight. It'll tell you with an iron. It'll tell you almost everything. If you can see with the foot spray whether it was toe or heel. The vertical contact pretty much tells you ground contact as well. Too high on the face is fat. Too low on the face is thin. There's some nuances there. You'd have to have your low point in front of the ball, but for most people, it's a great proxy. And then the ball flight will, within reason, tell you path and face. If the ball goes left, open the face. Ball goes right, close the face more until that ball is on target. Once you start hitting on target shots, the curvature that it takes to get there will tell you what the path is. And then you can decide whether you want to change it or not. If you're hitting a draw onto the target, but it's landing on the target all the time, you don't need to change the path. It's pretty good as it is. I don't like to see huge amounts of curvature, but so yeah, we can do a lot with just our eyes and foot spray. So probably cost the manufacturers a few $100 million there, right? Of the GC quad and
Well,
TrackMan,
listen,
but
I,
we love them.
we both have, nice launch monitors. I like them for honestly the accuracy of the ball flight simulation.
Yeah,
That's particularly what I'm looking for. And yeah, once in a while I'll put the sticker on my iron to see where my path is, but I know it's, I know roughly where it is. Angle of attack with driver, that's a important one that I like, but I know, yeah, if I'm launching it 13, 14, 15 degrees, good contact, man, it must be good. It must be plus 3, 4, or 5. So sometimes I'll check in with that. But yeah, I guess the balance I always want to remind people about is that I think Julie Elion mentioned this in our last episode where she was talking about kind of data and her perspective as a mental coach is that she was kind of like, well, I don't know if it's the best thing for a lot of players. And it's not. So if you go overboard with this stuff and you're on the golf course and you've been on a track, man, you're like, man, my dynamic loft and low point number and this and that, and it's like floating around in your head, you've gone too far.
Yeah.
You've gone way too far. Like and some people love all that stuff. They want to organize all the tiles on there and see them all. Again, it's nice to see it, especially for a teaching professional. But yeah, we've done episodes on launch monitors. I love them. I like the numbers, but I still want to play this game intuitively and in an athletic way.
My launch monitor is basically for me a $20,000 foot spray. That's all I really look at these days is just the vertical strike and the horizontal strike because it tells you
Yeah, but
it's the
it's a
nearest.
good, you're teaching people as well, so it's a
Yeah, yeah.
diagnostic tool.
For myself, yeah, but that's right. When I'm teaching people on there, there are certain examples where having a launch monitor can be really valuable. For example, you'll get a player with a driver and they'll hit the ball to the left, and it's good to dig into the numbers, especially with a GC quad, and you can see was it a path change, a face change, or was it a strike change? And what I'm seeing a lot. This is an interesting one, but what I'm seeing a lot with modern drivers is that almost all directional issues can be attributed to face direction issues. Even the toe strikes now with modern drivers and how they've, managed to figure out moments of inertia and gear effect and the curvature, bulge and roll of the face. If you toe it now, say you have a square path and square face, if you center it, it's going to go like a laser down the center. If you toe it, it'll still finish down the center for most club heads. I do see some club heads that have more gear effect than others, but it's nice to be able to see these to create or gather correct attribution for the actual fault. Certain things like angle of attack you can't see as well. That can be valuable as well. So sometimes if I've got a player and they hit a fat shot, I'll look at their angle of attack to see if that's changed significantly, because that's a sign that the low point position has changed. And if the angle attack number hasn't changed much, I know it's a vertical arc depth issue. They've just dropped a bit too deep and hit it fat. And so again, we can start working on the best option for them then, the thing that's actually changed there. So yeah, those are the impact laws. Obviously, I suppose in a way it's helped to push the agenda of the modern ball flight laws, the new ball flight laws, or we should say the correct ball flight laws. So I suppose one of the old things that we used to believe was ball started on the path and curved to where the face was looking. So, if you wanted to hit a draw with the old way of doing it, you would have to have the face looking at the target and you would swing right of that. We know now that that would create a hook. So, the modern ball flight laws, the ball starts on the face and curves away from the path. The connection between modern and all ball flight laws, the thing that was consistent between them, was that if the face was closed to the path, the ball would curve left. And if the face was open to the path, the ball would curve to the right for a right-handed golfer. So if that's kind of what I used to follow as a kid. So the old ball flight laws didn't hurt me too much, but yeah.
I think it's really the face's relationship to the target that screwed me up. So I took it where I'm like, oh, to hit a fade, like I need this face really open. It was like open the face to where you want it to land, and I was like, so that's how I actually don't think of my face angle relative to my path. I think of it really relative to the target. So I think open face to start the ball right of my target. Now, if I was a fader, I'd think closed, but that's relative to the target. That's where this could hurt your head a bit because I think relative to target, and some people describe it relative to the path.
Mhm.
Both are technically right. It's just kind of how you're internalizing it.
Yeah, exactly. And there's also, it brings up the whole point of feel versus real.
Yes.
So what we think we're doing and what we're actually doing are not always the same. In order when I play a fade, I actually set the face up open to the target at address. So that brings in the idea of where you start is not necessarily where you impact as well. If I look at my GC quad numbers, it's producing what the reality is. I'm swinging 6 degrees left with a face that's 3 degrees left, but I set up with the face open to produce that. So again, it can get so complicated that's why these simple algorithms work of, if you need the ball to finish more right, open the face more. If you need to finish it more left, close the face more. And then curvature can be done with different path changes. But yeah, so impact laws helped popularize things. And I think one of the things I put in the book was, I don't know why I use this phrase, but if you're a headless chicken on a surfboard, the ball doesn't care. It only knows what's happening with the club and ball at impact. I have no idea why I used that phrase. I think I was in a drunken stupor when I wrote that.
Maybe you need a 10th anniversary edition where you go back and alter some of the metaphors. Is that a
Well,
metaphor, right? I
didn't
always
think
forget metaphor or analogy, right?
Yeah. I didn't think anybody would read it, so I'll keep it in. It's good fun. But yeah, the point there is that the ball only knows impact. And if people have seen my weird swing experiments, I posted it again recently where I'm doing all these different wild swings just to prove that as long as that club moves through impact correctly, the ball flight will be as physics would dictate it. And that's not to say make the silliest swing that you can, but it's to say that any swing can work if the impact physics is good. So that moves on to topic number 2, macro versus micro technique. So, the industry, I think I don't want to say that this book, revolutionized the industry. It's more, it brought to the attention that the difference between macro technique are things that we can see on camera. They're very visible. They're the things that for the last 100, 200 years, however long golf has been taught, those are the things that have been taught. Move your hips this way, shift your weight this way, release a certain way, shoulder turn, head movement. Everything we can see on camera is classed as macro technique. And almost all bad shots have been attributed to a change in macro technique. And I was noticing as I was instructing that I would do this little test with everybody. I would film their swing and I would catch their good shots. And I would keep filming until there was a bad shot there, until their bad shot came out. And then we jump in, we go on software, computer analysis software, and we would side by side it, put the good swing on the left, the poor swing on the right. And we would go through it frame by frame. And in the vast majority of cases, we're looking at it, me and the pupil, and we're like, there's hardly any difference here.
It's the
And
same exact swing.
yeah. And I would always ask them after the bad shot, I was like, so what changed in that? What did you feel changed? And they would inevitably tell me something like, oh, I came way over the top of it. And then when we had it side by side on video, we would see, well, that club's coming down on the exact same plane. In many cases, I would say in more cases, the thing that they thought changed, the complete opposite happened. So an example of this, someone would top a ball and they'd say, I lifted my head on that one. And when we put them side by side, they kept their head down longer on the one that they topped, usually, in more cases than not. In most cases, though, there was basically no change. We almost thought it was like, or the people thought it was trickery. They thought, wait there, you've just put the same swing up. And I'm like, no, look at the background. The person in the background is different. So that started me thinking about, well, what is actually going on here then? If one shot is good and one shot is bad, but the swings look the same. And even to the point where we started getting things like K-Vest and more advanced data on them, and we still couldn't find which one was the bad one. There were definite patterns in there, obviously. And I say that the macro technique, the big things that we see on camera, will show the patterns that the player has. So you can tell looking at a swing if someone's going to suffer more with fat shots than thin shots. You can tell if someone's going to play pulls and fades onto the target. You can look at a swing and say, well, that's not a drawer of the golf ball. That's basically a fader. But you couldn't really from the swing tell whether a shot was a pull or a slice or a shot on target. They would often look very, very similar. So then that's where I started to develop the ideas of micro technique. It's like, well, what are the small things that are changing here? And, this was around about the time that TrackMan was starting to come out and being more popular. And so you started to see that, oh my God, like when someone hits an on target shot, And then the next one, they slice it 30 yards to the right. TrackMan's showing the face was only 3 degrees open or 2.5 degrees open there. So I would jump on my computer and I would simulate this with Photoshop. I'd get a club face and I'd open it, close it, and see what 3 degrees actually was. And
Not
shockingly
much.
enough, yeah, you barely can see it. So I'm thinking, wait there, you can't see this, yet we're expected to feel this and control this to this amount. While we're swinging a club head around our body, we can't even see where the club head is, and we're doing it at 90, 100 mile an hour plus. This is this is crazy. And it started to make sense then when you would watch Rory McIlroy hit one into the trees left and you video the swing, you say, well, he's got all the good movements there. He's doing the correct sequence. That club didn't drop incredibly underplane or anything like that. It's just, makes sense now. And yeah, so it's, the other areas of micro technique as well. Got a
Well,
few
would
examples.
it be fair to say then, so speaking with most instructors, things like club path, angle of attack are consistent with most players. So most players, the slicer is going to have a 8, 10, 12 degree out to in swing path. It's not going to change that much from swing to swing, and maybe they're hitting 4 or 5 degrees down. So that would be something you would see more on camera at the
Mm.
macro pattern. But from shot to shot, it's 2 degrees closed on one shot. That one's okay. 3 degrees open relative to the target. Now that's right going right. Like, so the micro movement would be like the little change in the wrist of the face angle at impact, which is not, would you consider that the micro movement, like that little change? Or let's say with driver, they healed it a bit and then that made the slice even worse.
Yeah,
Is that fair?
yeah, exactly. So, micro techniques can be the face angle. The path does change as well. You can call the path in a way a micro technique because it's going to vary.
Yeah.
If a player is 8 degrees left, one swing they might be 7 degrees left, another one they might be 9 degrees left.
But
But
it wouldn't
usually,
change as much as face angle would.
yeah, there's
Or
kind
is
of
that
three
dependent?
there's three things going on. Like you said, number one, the face will change more than the path.
Yes.
Usually for most players, and there are obviously outliers with this, the face changes about twice as much as the path. So I'll see a standard deviation of maybe even in my own game, the path changes by half a degree standard deviation, and the face changes by 1 degree standard deviation. For other players, and this is the thing. So I'm doing that as a +5 handicap, and that's typically what I see with really good. If I get a tall player, that's what I would see their numbers as well. Then you look at a 10 handicap, and their path might have a standard deviation of 1.5 degrees and face of maybe 3 degrees standard deviation. So there's not much difference. If you compare those and you actually look at what 1 degree is, it's like, so this is the difference between a tall pro and a 15 handicap. That's crazy to think this. Yeah, we're often looking for the big things in the swing to move the needle, and the reality is, yes, big things matter, but it might just be doing the really small things better than anybody else. So it goes back to every sport talks about this, right? The fundamentals, master the fundamentals. It's like, well, what are the fundamentals in golf? It's not grip, stance, and posture necessarily. It's ground contact, face direction. Master those. Just become so extremely good at those that you're better than anybody else, and you will see improvements. But they're not going to be huge jumps necessarily. It's going to just be small changes to the consistency of these factors. So yeah, there's the face changes more than the path. The face also has a bigger effect on the outcome. So 1 degree of face change is going to have a bigger effect on the outcome than 1 degree of path change. And also there's the other thing of when the path does change, usually it changes in the way that will drag the face with it. So say someone swings 1 degree more left. If it was just a robot, then that ball would actually go more to the right. But with a human, when a human swings 1 degree more left, they also tend to move the face a little bit more left. So it doesn't create as much of a change with the outcome. So there's 3 layers there that would signify that if there's an outcome error, it's 90% of the time it's a face change that's created that, not necessarily a path change. Other micro techniques, where we hit on the face, I'm looking with my GC quad when I got a lesson. If someone hits 5 millimeters towards the toe, and then the next one is 15 millimeters towards the toe, 1 centimeter is what, zero point 0.4 of an inch or something like that.
I have no idea.
Yeah, it's not a lot. It's not a lot. It's basically three grooves. Three grooves is about 9 or 10 millimeters. So, and that's very significant. It's hugely significant in terms of ground contact, the vertical part, but also even in toe and heel. If I hit one 5 millimeters on the toe, I'm not going to notice it. If I hit one 15 millimeters on the toe, I'm going to get a significant drop off in distance. That can mean stiffing it on the pin, or hitting a bunker and losing half a shot if you've got a good up and down. So yeah, that 1 centimeter of difference could be, in terms of strokes gained, you got 10 foot, knock it at 10 feet, and you got a 50% chance of holding it, maybe, versus being in the bunker, 50% chance of up and down. That could be a whole shot at 10 centimeter in terms of strokes
That's
gained.
way too generous what you just said.
Yeah, yeah,
No
it
one's
is.
getting up 50% from bunkers.
Yeah, well,
Bunkers are like pretty much a full stroke penalty for most golfers.
yeah, it vary
They should
for.
be. They're a hazard.
Yeah, if it's a full shot, then yeah, each bunker is. And if they then, on the reverse side, if they knock it to 10 feet, and they got a 10% chance of holding it,
Yeah,
so it's
well, the
1.1 shots of difference there.
big difference is, are you on the green or not? Like, that's, you're on the green, your chances of making a relatively easy par go up dramatically. You miss the green, now you're most likely making bogey at most skill levels, or worse.
Exactly, yeah. So that's
Huge
where
difference.
strategy is going to be huge there. That 1 centimeter miss, if you got a poor strategy, is going to cost you more than if you were aiming past the pin. In fact, that one
Well,
centimeter miss might be closer to the flag.
all the reason we've talked about video, I don't think either of us are against video completely. But if you're someone on your own who's just kind of looking at your swing and you're like, I don't like the way my hands look at transition, or my swing looks too long or across the line, and you're looking at those macro movements and you're not paying attention to the micro ones, where if you place your attention there and weren't worrying about what it looks like, we would argue that you'll make a bigger change in your ball striking and scoring ability, versus kind of looking for these big things in your swing that you don't fully understand. I think swing instructors should understand them. But people always try and cut my head off on social media when I say that I think video can be a horrible tool for golfers on their own. But that's, I think, part of what you're saying is they're looking at macro movements that they don't fully understand and that are not really contributing to what's going on at impact.
Well, that's the default, right? Is just to go to macro movements, because that's what all instruction
It's what you
is
see.
is about.
Yeah.
Even to this
Yeah.
day, on YouTube, for example, if I talk about micro movements, it may be not as exciting as talking about the new addictive lead arm
So
adduction
addicting.
position.
My
Yeah.
God. I literally can't stop watching it. I'm like, 14 hours a day. It's that addicting.
What I'd say to people is, usually I ask people in a lesson, your best shot with the swing that you have now, would you take that? Are you happy with that? And everybody inevitably is, yeah, I love my best shots. It's like, well, let's do those more often, or that, at least make that a possibility. And that's going to be achieved by the micro motions, improving of those. But I also think, a huge thing with the industry is a lot of instructors even don't think that micro can be changed, directly. They think it's all a product of macro movements and big changes. Lots of instructors don't believe in things like feel. I disprove that every day. I can disprove that for any instructor listening. If I stood in front of you and you asked me to hit it from the toe or the heel, I can do it. You ask me to hit 15 millimeters towards a heel or 15 millimeters towards a toe, I'm going to get pretty close to that exact millimeter. I've got great feel, and this is something that I wasn't born with. I remember times where I couldn't do this, and so it can be improved. These things they matter a huge amount, and they can be improved with the right training exercises. Yet the default in the industry is, let's make a huge change to your motion. And the irony is, when you make a huge change to the motion, you probably hurt the micro more, in a way. And
Well,
anybody who's ever
you
made,
now you got to work for new feels.
Yeah, anybody who's ever made a macro change, a swing change, turn their shoulders or doing something different, they'll very have likely found that they don't hit it well straight away. That's because it disrupts the micro. So yeah, it's just being aware of these things, understanding there is a difference there. Your swing can look exactly the same on camera, yet produce different results. The idea that micro can be changed through the correct exercises, differential variability practice, things like that. Other micro examples, if people are really struggling, what is micro here? So if you drop an eighth of an inch in height, say you make two swings. One swing, you flush the ball, and then the next one, you make the exact same swing and you drop an eighth of an inch in height. Did I write down what an eighth of an inch? No, I didn't. You would hit 4 inches behind it, lay the sod over it. An eighth of an inch in height. You're probably not even going to see that on camera. So you're going to lay the sod over it, get the camera out and look and say, what's different here? Or what most people do is they don't even do a side by side. They just look at their swing and say, what don't I like about my swing? And then they maybe make a false connection. They're like, oh, I don't like the fact I'm steeping over the top there. Maybe that must be why I've caught it fat. And it's not. In fact, a steepen over the top swing probably helps you not catch it fat, if anything. So then they go off and they try and swing under plane and they end up hitting it worse. So understanding these things is so important. But one exercise I'd give every listener here, go out, hit some good shots, get it on camera. Hit some bad shots, get them on camera. Put them
Yeah,
side by side. You
yeah.
will be shocked at how little changes.
I'd there'd be no way to prove this, but I'd wonder. It's probably like a quarter degree or half a degree of what it takes to make money as a pro golfer versus not make it in terms of face angle. You were talking about the standard deviation, and I always say like I just think pro golf is one big face angle competition, but I bet it's
Yeah.
that small, like quarter of a degree. Like, what's the difference between hitting iron shots 25 feet from the hole from 150 versus 35 feet? That could be making it or not making it. The line is that razor thin.
Well, yeah. So, I mean, with a wedge, I can do this. For every 1 degree at 100 yards, every 1 degree of phase difference, it equates to about 1 yard, which is what, 9 feet? So basically, if the best in the world is
3 feet.
20 foot away from the flag, I don't know. What are the numbers?
A yard is 3 feet.
Oh, yeah, 3 feet. Oh, yeah. What was I thinking? I tripled it and then tripled it again in my head. I don't know why I did that. So, yeah. So if the best in the world is 20 feet away.
Yeah, best on PGA Tour every year from like 100 yards in the fairway is about 15 feet. Like median, I think, is like 20, and like bottom of the pack's like 25 ish or more, which is not a lot when you think about it. But over the course of a season, like that's more birdies. Like they'll make some more of those putts. Like it adds up.
Yeah. So you're talking like 3 degrees difference between the best and the worst.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
much. It's
Something like
crazy.
that. So yeah, it's interesting. Like I said, these small things, the best in the world are just super good at these small things. I think, that's why a lot of players who don't change their swing that much, they have good careers, or they just let it evolve naturally. Like Jim Furyk. Yeah, you can look at his swing over the course of 20 years, and it changed, but it was kind of organically that way. I think a lot of this is because if you make huge wholesale changes to your swing, it can really disrupt the micro. It's very, very difficult to get those back in play. So, yeah, I think, I did a quote thing the other day about the Einstein quote, doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. I think in golf, you can do that. I think you can do the same thing over and over and over, just making micro adjustments and get better and better. That's basically what I've done, you've done for the last 10 years or so. I don't even know what my swing looks like. All I've been doing is every shot, that one a little left, I'm going to open the face. Oh, I've opened it too much. I'm going to go somewhere in between. Just playing that game constantly, and I've got better at it over time. Not hugely, but you can see, the difference between zero point 0.7 standard deviation and zero point 0.5 standard deviation is very meaningful.
Yes. Yeah. I do agree with that. But there are, would you agree that there is a time and a place for certain golfers, like to make where you look at them and you're like, all right, we're going to make a fairly large looking change that is going
Yeah.
to give you also a better chance at presenting better micro movements?
Yeah, exactly. So yes, good question. Because when are the macro things important? I mean, you could say that your macro creates the patterns, as I said earlier. So if someone is 10 degrees out to in, then you're going to see that on camera. Can they hit good shots 10 degrees out to in? Yes, they can, and they can hit reliably, repeatably good shots with that as well. But does that limit their potential? There is an argument that yes, it does, because it's going to cut off distance. They may get slightly different patterns with different clubs. If you're 10 degrees out in with every club in the bag, you'll find your wedges pull, your 7-iron might go online, and your driver slices if you're doing the same face and path presentation. Or even, if you thin one or hit one a little heavy and get some debris trapped between the ball and the face, that same path and face presentation can produce slightly different outcomes. Or even in winds as well. If you shape the ball a lot in the wind, I believe it's kind of anecdotal, but there's a little bit of physics behind it as well. It's going to be harder to manage. If you're hitting a 40-yard slice, for example, and you're going downwind, what's the wind going to do to that? It's going to
No,
straighten it out.
I think one of the main reasons I was able to straighten my ball flight was because I play in so much wind that it necessitated me figuring out a way not to curve it so much, because you can't, you got a hook wind with a hook pattern. Yikes. It's
Yeah.
like a missile coming in.
Or even when you're going into the wind, it's going to
Yeah, well,
exaggerate the
yeah, it
curvature and you're going to hit a.
exaggerates. Yeah, that was the main thing I noticed playing in 10 to 20 mile per hour wind. When you're hitting into it, you got curve on your ball, it's going to curve 2, 3, 4, 5 times more based on how much wind you're hitting into. Downwind, it won't do as much because that straightens the ball flight out. But yeah, we've got listeners in the UK and other parts of the world that are windy, and they all know this intuitively. You slice it into the wind, it's going to slice more. It makes the game way harder.
Exactly, yeah. And it even depends, like, say that wind is straight into you and you're hitting a big slice. Sometimes you can start it so far left, that wind actually pushes it even more left. And other times they'll start the curve and then the wind will add to what is it, Bernoulli's effect or something, and cause it to curve even more. It's just, I believe that curving the ball less is probably going to be beneficial. There are trade-offs with everything, obviously.
Of
If
course.
you take that slicer who slices it 50 yards and they do it really well and they've done it all their life, the trade-off is we're going to have to learn or relearn a movement in order to do this. So there's a potential light at the end of the tunnel there. But obviously the cost is, are you willing to put the work in order to get there? And we don't know ultimately if we'll reach the light at the end, always.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I guess you'd want someone who was good at curving it a lot, who had good face control, right? Like
Yeah.
you'd want to stick with that player more than the person who curved it a lot and was just all over the map with their face. And you got to find a better matchup.
And can also adapt as well. When I used to play a big curvature, a big draw, I would know that with my wedges, I'm not going to aim as far right. With my wedges, I'd probably aim slightly left, so it'd end up being more of a block onto the target.
Yeah.
But
Well,
with my
also,
driver,
yeah, it makes sense because just another ball flight law for people, or physics thing, is that club path has more influence on start direction with more loft.
yeah,
So
and
with
also
your
the
wedges,
ball.
yeah,
Sorry, also the ball doesn't curve as much with a wedge.
it wouldn't. Yeah.
Yeah, if you had the path 3 degrees in to out and the face 1.5 degrees open with a wedge, you're only going to get a little bit of curvature. With a driver, you're going to see like
Yeah.
30 yards of curvature in the air.
My swing path is actually still quite extreme with my wedges, and I'm very good with like 50, 110 yard wedge shots. Like I could be still 8 degrees into out, and I'm hitting those pretty damn good still. That's the one part of my game where it's still extreme, but it works.
Yeah, yeah. Um, the other thing, so going on to that question of when would you make macro changes, I think if the movement is creating a very consistent pattern. So say for example, someone's weight is on their back foot
Hmm.
and you look at their low point and their low point is behind the ball. And every single swing, their low point is behind the ball. You could say that, okay, even in this case, the difference between their good and bad shots is still micro. But I would also look at that player and say they have a smaller window of micro available to them. So if they drop a tiny bit, there's going to
Yeah.
be a super chunk.
They
Whereas
got to
once you
get
get
it
the
just right.
yeah, so once you get the low point in front, it doesn't guarantee that that player is going to be better because they still, even with the low point in front with a good pattern, they still have to master the micro from there. But I
But they
say
got
it
to they
puts you in the
well
ballpark.
you've
Yeah,
told me that you've looked at some video. I've been sending you some random videos of my chipping action lately, and you've been kind of telling me that, being like, "Well, you can get away with this, but I think you'd get away with it more if you were, a little bit rising up their impact more and stuff like that." And it makes sense. It's just it's still hard for me to do those macro changes.
yeah. So for me, macro is all about changing patterns. If I feel that's going to be beneficial for a player, and it's about opening up bigger margins for error as well. We've talked. There are very few of these things, but we talked with Chris Como about the idea of a flat spot. I know that's what we talked about in your chipping as well. With Joe Mayo as well, we're talking about steeper angle attacks, more forward shaft lean. Those things can improve or widen the ground contact area that's acceptable. There are ways of making the game easier for yourself, but ultimately, we're all at the mercy of what our micro did. Even the pros. You look at Rory McIlroy when he hits one offline. I don't know why I keep using him.
He did struggle with his driver yesterday. It's Players Championship week. He only hit 4 fairways yesterday. He struggled.
Yeah. Well, here's an interesting thing. So there is actually a study on this. It's not published yet, but I want to get them on the podcast. I went to Las Vegas University to watch them do some of this data collection where they put a bunch of really good players. They're all like plus figure handicaps, scratch handicaps. They hooked them up to the best motion capture, loads of frames per second. And you can see the difference in like 6 degrees, 1 degree of everything. And they basically asked them to hit some shots down towards the target, and they were looking at the movements when they hit good shots, and then they looked at the movement when they hit their farthest left, their worst left shot, and their worst right. And what they tried to do was look at what was the difference, or was there more variability on those swings. So that was the hypothesis, and what they found was no. So they had just as much variability swing to swing on their good shots as they did on their bad shots, which is mind blowing. You would expect to see, oh, their wrist angle must have changed on the left shot, but it's like this big soup of maybe 100 variables. You've got wrist angle, you got lead arm, you got forearm rotation, all these different movements we can have. And if you looked at those on a table and you saw them move, you wouldn't see on the worst shots, you wouldn't see anything highlighted there as, oh, this is the cause for that bad shot. In fact, you would look at all their good shots and say, well, look, these things changed on their good shots. They're doing a good outcome with different things each time. And this goes really deep into motor learning, is the fact that I'm sure some people have heard repetition without repetition, is basically the idea that even when we're repeating a task, we are actually doing it in subtly different ways each time.
So that's like
And so,
striking the nail on the center of the hammer, but you're arriving at it in a different manner.
yeah, exactly. Again, not hugely noticeable necessarily on camera, but we are doing it in different ways. And even though these things are subtle, they are very meaningful because golf is that precise. And so then it goes into, okay, well, with this information, how should we train? And this is why skill training is such a big thing for me, is that skill training is the way of mastering this micro stuff. I know it, I see it every time. I've got the data on it, and when people do the skill training versus don't, and the ones who do the skill training are better, they improve quicker. So yeah, oh, that goes into the next topic, skill versus technique. I actually had a little discussion. So we've got macro versus micro. Macro is the big stuff we can see, micro is the small things, both techniques. Skill versus technique. Technique is the method employed. Technique is basically what you did. Right? You can have good technique, you can have bad technique. It's what you did. Skill for me is more of an ability to achieve a given goal. So skill is kind of demonstrated through technique, but they are different. So for example, sitting here doing nothing, no golf club in my hand, I'm a skilled golfer. Even though I'm not demonstrating it right now, I have the ability to hit more toe, more heel. I have the ability to hit the ball more left, more right. I have an ability, I have a skill. Now, when you put a golf club in my hand and I do that, I'm now using technique, I'm using a method to demonstrate that skill. And in fact, I can use multiple different techniques to demonstrate skill. As my wild swings video showed, I can grip the club with a strong grip and hit the target. I can grip it with a weak grip and hit the target. I can loop the club over my head and hit the target. I can lock my hips in place and just swish at it with my arms and hit the target. So I'm using different techniques there to demonstrate a skill. Now, obviously, some techniques are going to be better than others, or maybe easier than others. But this is kind of just separating the idea of skill and technique. Other ways, techniques you can look at, again, macro techniques, shoulder turn, weight shift, plane. But even things like strike, I still class that as a technique. It's just a micro technique. So what are skills then? The ability, that's the key word there, the ability to hit where you want on the face is a skill. The ability to change the face in 1 degree increments is a skill, or 2 degree increments. In fact, the precision that you can do it shows what level of skill you are. You know, a higher skill player can do it with a more refined precision. The ability to change path. You know, I've got a video with a nail drill where I say, right, I'm going to swing this one 10 degrees left, bang, 10 degrees left. I'm going to swing this 10 degrees right, get it maybe 9 degrees right, swing it 0. I'll hit within a degree of it, usually most of the time. So my ability to change the path shows a skill, and my ability to do it precisely shows my level of skill. So McIlroy, I mean, he does this quite often, but showed him doing the top shot again. Have you seen that way?
Yeah, it
He's
just changes the arc depth of his swing. It looks exactly the same. He just tops it.
exactly, yeah. So he's demonstrating poor technique, you know, because topping the ball is not good technique, but he's also demonstrating at the same time high skill. So again, that shows the separation between the ability to nip the top of the ball by a millimeter is super high skill, but you wouldn't say that's a good technique that he's producing to do it.
Yeah, the way I'm just as you're saying this, another way of thinking about it for me, because I always think like, why is golf so different that we're so obsessed with the technique versus other sports? Because when you think about other sports where someone's coming at you, so American football, soccer, basketball, think of a quarterback, someone's rushing him. Patrick Mahomes is unbelievable at altering his arm angles to go around the defender. So he's altering his technique in the moment to achieve, to literally get the ball out of his hands before he gets killed. Or someone shooting a jump shot, it's going to look a little differently every time in terms of technique because the defender is going to alter that. So I think most sports, we don't have the Konica Minolta Biz Hub. I know they did away with that thing, but like you're not watching a game and they're like, oh, look at what he did on that, because they're not stationary games. Like we don't really care about how it looks because the skill is so much on display. Whereas in golf, because it's stationary, we're so obsessed with, because you have the ability to make it look the same every time because no one's making you do otherwise.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I
That
mean,
make the yeah, that I mean that's how I always think about like why do we do it so differently in golf than other sports?
well, adaptability is a huge part of skill as well. I mean, you could say it is skill, but I just see it as a component of skill. So obviously in other sports, you know, tennis, a ball might be in a certain position and the player has to do something. Maybe they've never even done that
Yeah, they
shot in
make
their life.
crazy adjustments in tennis. It's unbelievable.
Exactly, yeah. So their skill of being able to get that ball back over the net is super high, and they can do it. They have to do it using a million different
Yeah, they're
techniques.
going to do a
Some,
thousand different techniques during a match
yeah, and
because
sometimes
the
they have
ball's
to
going to come at them
invent them.
differently. Yes.
I mean, it's rare, but obviously, if they're in a situation where they've never ever been before, their brain can invent a new technique on the fly to get that ball back over the net. I'm sure Federer can do stuff where he impresses himself sometimes. In golf, we don't have that as much because the ball is stationary, so we never really have to invent too much. I mean, obviously, you might be against a out of bounds stake one time, you have to do something weird, or in a bunker, and you have to lift a foot up, and so sometimes we have to invent things. You know, adaptability is still a key element of golf. Sometimes we have to hit it higher, lower. Basically, every time we put a new club in our hand, we have to adapt. There's differences in forces and torques that we have to do between a sand wedge and a 7-iron. We're not swinging exactly the same. If you looked at the force, like how much you're pulling on the handle or torquing the club, there's going to be big differences between those clubs. So yeah, our ability to change these things. I've talked about technical micro technique skills, which are ability to hit the face differently, higher, lower, toe, heel, ability to present the face more open or closed. But we also have outcome skills as well. So your ability to hit the fairway is what I would call an outcome or performance skill. So you can test someone's ability to hit the fairway. They could do it with the same technique over and over, or you might get Bubba who's doing high skill and they're using different techniques. One time he might fade it into the fairway, one time he might draw into the fairway or green. So they're using different techniques to achieve the same outcome. Sometimes I use the example of Dustin Johnson versus Webb Simpson. So they were, at the time when I did the analysis, they were very similar in terms of strokes gained, distance, and accuracy. Yet Dustin Johnson has a crazy bowed wrist at the top and uses a low forearm rotation at the bottom, whereas Webb Simpson was more cupped at the top and uses a lot of rotation at the bottom. So two different techniques to produce very consistent and similar outcomes. So again, the difference between technique and skill. My swing experiments were showing poor technique, but great skill. When I loop it over my head, it's poor technique, but because my skill is high, I could go out and shoot single figures easily with looping it over my head. Whereas you could see another player who's got a much more orthodox technique, more textbook technique, who might not be able to break 80. So I could beat them with a worse technique because my skill level is higher. Another example, you might have an upward angle of attack with irons. So that's a poor technique. It's going to give you a low margin for error. But if you're very, very skilled, you'll be able to still hit your smaller windows with that, which is something what you used to do with the irons, right? You're super good with a shallow angle attack. So skill level is higher, but I think you benefited more from the slightly downward angle attack over time.
Yeah, more as you said, it allowed a little more wiggle.
Yeah. Exactly. Other examples to highlight this, sometimes we can improve our technique. So you might go through a swing change and you look on camera and you're like, oh, that is better technique. But the act of thinking about your technique can actually disrupt coordination. So I say it's a de-skilling thing when we disrupt coordination. So lots of things that can de-skill us. Pressure, hunger, tiredness, things like that, or how we think can
Worrying
de-skill
about
us.
worrying.
Yeah. All these mental factors can de-skill us a little bit. They can throw out our coordination. So you can say the technique looks the same, but the outcomes are worse because we've de-skilled ourselves. Or, in Germany or Austria, when I used to train out there, you'd have a lot of players who were very technique obsessed, and they like to train the Germans and the Austrians, as you would imagine them to be. So you'd find a lot of players who super intelligent, hardworking, their swings would look great, and you put it on camera and you'd say, what handicap are you? And I would look at this thinking, well, they got to be off single figures. And they're like, oh, I can't break 100. Like, what? Like, your takeaway is more textbook than mine. Your swing plane is more your top of the swing is more textbook, your grip, and you can't break 100. So again, high technique, very low skill. It's hard to find that. And I think this confuses a lot of people, is because players who are generally or who have good technique, the only way you can get technique is to learn a lot about the game and practice a hell of a lot, so that automatically skills you. So they can it's a correlation, not a causation. Always, it's not always a causation.
Yeah,
So
you just can't see. I did a short form video a few months ago. I had a bunch of people send me their swings and their handicap levels, and I was like, okay, let's guess the scratch golfer. And of course, like very few people got it right. I remember Lou Stagner put my swing on Twitter, 3 or 4 years ago, or probably longer than that at this point. And most people are like, oh, that's a 10 or a 15 handicap. Like you can't see, like you couldn't see my ability to control the club face at impact. Like I'm quite good at that. But you can't see it on video. I remember I got a lesson once. This is when I wasn't very good. I was in Florida in my like earlier mid 20s. I just randomly got a lesson, and then the pro was like, what's the problem here? I'm like, there's a lot of problems that he saw me on the course later. He was driving by, and I was just a lunatic, like a million over par. And he saw me. I'm like, yeah, this is the problem. No skill, no head for the game. I mean, he thought I was. He asked me, he's like, oh, you must be like. He was just watching me hit balls on the range. He's like, oh, you must be like low single digit, like close to scratch. I'm like, not even close, buddy. Like, can't do it right now.
And it helps guide me as an instructor. You know, the first thing I do when I look at a swing is I try and say, what could this player be handicap wise with that motion? And then I try and match it with where they are. If I look at a swing and I say, well, this player should be off scratch. If their skills were reasonable, they should be off single figures. And then they tell me they're a 20 handicap, then I might put more emphasis on playing skills, you know, strategy, or, you know, the micro skills where they're hitting on the face, ground contact, face direction, those things. So yeah, it helps guide me as to what a player needs more of, definitely. But then you do see sometimes other players who have just horrible techniques, like the weak grip, lots of cup at the top, face is wide open. And you just think, well, and they're slicing everything to the right. You think, well, this player might be highly skilled, but we don't know. They're using a technique that's so horrible, so difficult to create their outcome, that let's just change the technique in this example and put them in the ballpark, really. It's all about that. Put them in the ballpark, and then the skill stuff, the micro stuff helps them play.
I would love to. I could facilitate this, but I would. Most golfers can't. Most golfers don't get to see a lot of, let's call it the scratch plus handicaps. And like, if I took people to tournaments that I play in with mostly golfers of that level, and I took a video of everyone's swing, 90% of them would look very funky to you. I promise. Like, I very rarely play with other players where I'm like, wow, you look like Adam Scott. It's very rare. And to be honest with you, I do see those players, and they're not the best ones. The absolute best players who I've competed against, like the people who are like the best in our section, and these are like plus 3, 4, 5 handicaps. I mean, you would never know if you saw them on a swing video. Never, ever,
Yeah.
ever, ever know. I didn't get to see that for a very long time, and it screwed me up quite a bit because I didn't really know what was behind the curtain in better golf. And I really try and I think both of us are trying to pull that curtain behind with our content, because I think when you have this idea of what a better golfer looks like, that's not really true, then you chase the wrong things. And yeah, I'd love for people, if you have the opportunity to see like a good mid amateur event, like go watch, you could go to the US mid am, like people can walk around, like you're going to see a lot of funky looking golf moves. I promise you.
Or
But you're
look
going
at
to
the
see an
seniors tour.
incredible amount of skill, unbelievable skill, the best skill.
Yeah. Look at the seniors tour as well. You can see a lot of more funky movements on there as their bodies start to age and they can't do the same things. Or look at Scheffler. I mean,
Yeah, or look
no,
at Scotty Scheffler.
no instructor would, and this is kind of one of those things that people say. You know, I often put up Jim Furyk's swing as an example because he's just the most obvious one of the last 30, 40 years. And yeah, you're right. I wouldn't teach Furyk's swing. I also wouldn't unteach it necessarily because he's got so much. He can get the club on the ball effectively. And to teach him a more textbook swing would probably de-skill him. I know some people might argue that. I would argue the opposite. Look at Scheffler. He's, steep left arm, super steep left arm, funky foot movement. He's steep on the way down, early extends, not a ton of rotation through impact, hands work out of way. There's loads of things. He's got one of the earliest releases on tour as well.
Yeah.
Still
And
not
what
classed as an early release, but
and the best quote, I'm sure I mentioned it before from his longtime instructor, is that it was just saying like Golf Digest last year. He's like, all they ever focused on was club face awareness in his swing. If they could, he said, if we do that, we knew he was good. That's all they focused on was his club face awareness. He's the absolute best at that. If we did that test where we could figure out what the tolerance of face control was, I'd bet everything I've got that Scotty's is number one.
and then you have players like Tiger as well who have used multiple different methods, not crazy. Everybody keeps the same blueprint to their swing. Even Tiger, when you look at the 5-year-old or 10-year-old Tiger, they're a little footages out there. Lots of his movements look very similar. Or you look at a McElroy when he was in his youth versus now. There's never really, you can tell it's a McElroy. So that, that's an important thing as well, is a lot of times we might be moving away from our own swing DNA to try and change our technique to master, to make it look a certain way. We might be moving away from how our body wants the sequence. A lesson I had the other day, he was talking about, he's very inside on the takeaway and then comes over the top. And he actually, his path is very good through impact, but he's more inside over the top to do that. And he was like, well, this is the wrong way, right? Aren't you supposed to go outside and loop under? And I'm like, well, that's the way it's been taught for the last 20, 30 years. Yeah, go outside, loop under. But you go back to like the 30s, 40s, and you'll see like Bobby Jones, Sam Snead, Early Hogan. They were all swinging inside and going over the top and playing great. So it's just, these are just different methods. These are just different techniques. But what we're missing here is, well, the pros are very skilled. They can make any technique work. In fact, there is a guy out there, an instructor, who teaches inside more over the top. And I think for a lot of players, that could be better, because I think most people want to naturally sequence that way. More younger players want to be more outside and under. It's just the way their bodies sequence. But as your midriff and your back start to stiffen up, those movements can be harder to create. So, yeah. Skill versus technique. Work on your skills. Don't just work on your technique, and understand there's a difference between them.
Indeed.
Yeah. Periodization. This can be a short one. This is another topic in the practice manual, periodization. This was huge in weight training. The idea that, if you've ever looked at bodybuilders, at least they used to, I don't know how it is now, but they used to go through periods of bulking. So they would eat loads and loads of calories, put on mass, and then they would go through a period of cutting before their performance, before their on-stage performance. So they'd lose all the fat. They would strip it off, and the idea was they'd strip off all that fat, and they'd have all this new muscle underneath it. In golf, you heard Tiger talk about peaking for certain tournaments, and I was often thinking, well, how do you peak for a tournament? What would that even look like? I think the idea, maybe it wasn't as explicit, but the idea that, okay, you've got the Masters coming up. You need to hit certain shapes of shot, for example. Let's
Got to draw it
start
off the 10th
working
tee.
on it. Yeah. Do you want to start working on it on the week before, or do you want to start working on it a few months before and figuring out, all right, I want to get control of my draw shot and start to hit that? If, for example, that is a better shot to hit. I'm sure some of the stats guys, Lou or Scott, might counter that argument.
Well, I think they're not against it. That's why they would hit 3-wood off the 10th tee, because you could shape it more in the opposite direction.
Yeah.
Whole other discussion. But yeah, keep going. This applies to a lot of different situations with golfers, obviously.
Yeah. But my idea or my interpretation of periodization was to say, well, okay, we need these phases of growth, where we're maybe exploring new things. So just like the previous topic, maybe you want to change your technique. Maybe you want to make a macro change to your technique to open up a new level of potential, right? To make your swing look more like a scratch player. So you open up at least that potential. But obviously making these changes can de-skill us. So then that leads to, well, when should we do these things? And the obvious example of that would be, let's save exploration and boundary pushing or growth for winter when we're not playing tournaments. One of the worst things I used to do as a kid was I would watch Tiger's swing the night before a tournament, practice this new move in the mirror, and then go out and try and play with that in the tournament next day. And it was horrible, because it's like, well, I haven't played with this. I haven't even hit many balls with this. I don't know how it reacts. I don't know what my shot shape does. I've just made my coordination work worse by thinking too internally. So, you look at a lot of the Nordic countries, Sweden, Finland, they will often in the winter be locked indoors. And so they did a lot of indoor training. They still do. Obviously with simulators now, it's much better. And so you had a lot of players there who would only have maybe 3, 4, 5 month seasons. And you think, how are these guys so good on tour? like the Henrik Stensons and that. And the answer was they were getting probably a nice mix of this growth during winter where they could push and challenge themselves with new things. And then in the summer, it's right, time to stabilize everything now. So we have these growth or destabilization periods, and then you have these restabilization periods. Pre-tournament, for example, is not a good time to make major changes to your swing, but pre-tournament is a good time to calibrate, to maybe play some games on the range, or if you have the opportunity, get out and play on the golf course and drop a few balls down. So you're really simulating the actual tournament environment itself much better. Now, obviously, as a pro, you can get all phases in. You're practicing 40, 50 hours a week. So you can do everything as a pro. But even in that case, you may want to bias the ratios a little bit more. Maybe 80% technique changes in winter, and then pre-tournament you go to 80% stabilization. Whereas as an amateur, you have less time. Maybe you've got 1 hour, 2 hours a week. So you have to change your practice type depending on what you're doing. So maybe you have to save it more for winter to do that. You can even periodize things throughout the week. If you've got a tournament coming up on Saturday, you might have Monday where you're doing the destabilization technique changes. Tuesday might be let's hit toe heel. So again, it's kind of destabilization but growth. Then Wednesday you say, right, I'm going to start to stabilize everything. Let's calibrate. Let's find the center of the face again, ground contact. Let's work on the middle ground. Then Thursday you start to say, right, let's test certain things, see what my strategy is going to be on the golf course. Something I might test is let's do a fade versus a draw down the target, see which one wins. Or a test that I showed the other day was a hard 8-iron versus a soft 7-iron to see which one produces a tighter dispersion. And then the day before the tournament, the Friday, you're going to put yourself in a game-like scenario. You're going to say, right, I'm going to go between this target and this target. I'm going to hit as many in a row as I can. If I fail, I start again. So there's some kind of punishment there. I'm going to change clubs each time. Maybe I change even where the target is located. So you're randomizing things more. You're getting it more like the game scenarios. You're preparing for play. I never used to do that as a kid. And that's why I used to be awesome on the range and suck on the golf course. So anyway, when I started and actually GS Pro now is probably the best way of doing that. That's the simulation software for those who don't know. So we can actually play courses in our simulator, and it's amazing for me. So rather than me beating 108 irons onto a target and then not being able to transfer that to the golf course, now I can play on GS Pro and I can play Pebble Beach or something like that. I'm changing clubs each time. It's realistic. There's even pressure there because I'm competing against other guys in the leagues. So it just the idea that there is different types of training, and you can adjust the ratios depending on which part of the season you're in and what your goals are during that part of the season. Did you ever
Yeah,
do a lot of this, John, or was it kind of
I
unwritten that you would do that?
I would say I got way better at this the last 10 years. I mean, that's, my off seasons over the last decade have either been spent getting way better with my driver, working on that intensely, experimenting, doing some speed training, weight training, putting. So I've had different off season projects where, yeah, you're taking a bit more risks. You're getting more outside of the box. You're testing different equipment if that's something you want to pursue. That's when you're going to make the change. So I know if some players don't have the off season, we always get that comment, what off season? But yeah, once it comes May, June, July, and I'm in my tournament season, I'm just looking, I'm not going to make any major changes. I'm just trying to sharpen what I've got. So if something made me uncomfortable in a round, let's say I was struggling with my 50 to 80 yard wedges, I'm going to work on that in one practice session. So I try and use my on course performance during the season to guide whatever practice I'm going to do to kind of get me more comfortable there. So yeah, it really depends on which you beginner, intermediate, advanced golfer. It could look very different. Are you playing competitions? Are you not? So whatever level you're at in terms of and how much time you have, I think it could look different. But on a generic scale, like absolutely, there's different seasons of your game, so to speak, and the way you practice and prepare can look very different.
Even things like your chipping, even if you didn't have an off season, you might say, right, I've got a tournament coming up on Saturday, so Monday and Tuesday I'm going to work really hard on the technique, really internal focus, focusing on the movement itself.
Yeah,
And
I'll tell
then
you what. Yeah, with my chipping upcoming, so I've got it's March 14th. We're recording this. I've signed up for all my tournaments. I have tournaments starting in May. I'm gonna have to test. I'm pretty good with this modified one-handed thing I'm doing. It's not. Is it? Would you tell me as an instructor that's the way to go long term? Probably not. But I could chip fairly well holding the club with one hand and barely touching it with the other. I feel comfortable. I can make good ground contact. I'm going to test out in these early tournaments for whatever, chip shots that are giving me the willies, which are really the only the ones off the tight lies. I might just have to do that because I'm just going to say, like, this is the best I can do right now with the hopes that I can get back towards feeling comfortable over these shots and improving my technique and rising through impact, having my hands working up and all the stuff that, Andrew Rice told me you noticed. I've got to go with what I've got at some point, though,
well,
right?
that's it, right? So for now, I would continue working on the
Yeah, I am.
technique for
Exactly.
you.
So
Yeah.
right now I've been working on it, and man, this is the only off-season project. It's been two off seasons that I have not solved in my golf life. This
Yeah.
has really been hard for me.
Well, then
But
as you get closer to the tournament, you would start to then test those things. You start to
exactly.
say,
Yeah.
okay, let's
I'm
hit
going
a
to
few
start playing
chip shots.
rounds. I'm going to start
Yeah.
playing real rounds again, and I'm going to say, what can I do here? What can I stand over the ball being like, I could get that on the green, like fairly close and not like duff this thing. And it might be the one hander. Like I'm gonna
Yeah.
have to make that call in the next month or two.
Well, one way of testing it would be if you have this opportunity in your practice rounds would be anytime you have a chip shot, hit one with the new technique in quotes, and then hit one with the modified one hand approach, and just write down, the strokes gained for them or the footage away from the hole.
I could tell the difference immediately.
Yeah, well, that's it. You're testing, and basically from this split test, you get to see this one is performing best for me right now, and then the final stage is to put that into practice. So you say, okay, this was the winner, which might be the modified one-hand approach, and then you just play with that for a while. So you're ready for the tournament, basically,
Yeah.
with that
And
approach.
eventually you got to make that call as a golfer. So yeah, I'm putting myself under a decent amount of pressure with these tournaments, so it makes the distinction between the two a bit more extreme because listen, the outcome could be very extreme if I'm in a tournament and I'm going to try something that I just can't do right now. I'm going to be losing serious strokes around the green if I can't chip effectively. So I gotta go up there with something I feel comfortable with and can execute. And that's yeah, it's not pleasant, but it's what I have to deal with right now still.
Yeah. Well, an example in
But
my own game is, I have kind of two driver swings. One is the one that I've used all my life, and another one is where I pick my left foot up as I'm swinging back and then stamp it down in the downswing, kind of like a Jack Nicklaus. And when I do that, I can see 4 or 5 mile an hour increase in swing speed. Without any training, I can just do it. And so I can prove, in my technique work that I can do that and I can achieve it. But when it comes time to take it on the golf course, obviously I have less confidence. I have done these little split tests where I do it on the range. I do it with my GC quad. I'll hit 10 shots, foot down, 10 shots, picking the foot up. And obviously I see an increase in distance, but there is also an increase in dispersion. And then I just run some simulations with strokes gained and say, hitting it 20 yards farther. So that's going to be 1.4 shots strokes gained each round. But I'm hitting 2 shots more out of bounds out of every 10 shots. So
yeah,
that's
so yeah.
that counteracts it. So and then finally I dedicate a whole round or a couple of rounds to doing one method or the other, and then I look at how my strokes gained trends in a real situation. So yeah, all these things can be done for everybody else. I mean, for everybody else listening, it could be just new swing versus old swing. If you are making a swing change, spend some time doing that. Spend some time testing new swing versus old swing before you go on a tournament with it. It's okay, and this is where people go wrong. It's okay to work on a new swing and new movements, but still go out and play with the old feel. Okay, because if your goal is to continue to perform, don't shoot yourself in the foot by trying to force this new swing on the course when it's not ready. It doesn't mean that all that work you've done is irrelevant and washed out. The work that you've done is still there. You'll be able to tap back into it, or some percentage of what you've done with the technique work will seep into your natural swing and slowly evolve it over time.
It's just not ready for its debut.
Yeah, maybe that focus is not ready. So an example of that is when I changed my path from 8 degrees into out, and I first got on TrackMan and I started swinging more left, I could get it to the point where I could hit a zero path. But when I tested it, I still performed better with an into out path, or with my non-thinking swing, let's just say. So if I did 10 swings, I'm going to really swing left on this one and get a neutral path, versus 10 swings where I'm just going to swing natural. And what happened is over time, all that training I did on the left path made my neutral or natural path, more neutral. So now when I don't think about path, it's only 3 degrees into out instead of 9. So that training seeped into my unconscious swing. Locus of attention goes into that. That is something that I talked a lot about. This was big in the motor learning literature. Gabrielle Wolf, who we tried to get on the podcast, but she didn't want to come on, unfortunately. Come on, Gabrielle, you can do it. We've got lots of listeners.
Some people just don't. I understand it. Like, I get some people are just like, I've been on enough of them. I think I'm done.
Yeah, she probably doesn't get it. She's probably very busy and doesn't get a lot out of it, maybe. But she's
Yeah, I mean, it's a time commitment. I get it. We've had, I mean, just so people know, like we're always trying to get great guests on the show, and some people are just like, hey, I can't do it. Like, I'm too busy, or some people are just not interested, and I respect that as well. Like, we're not they're not beholden to us just because we ask them.
Exactly, yeah. So, even before I knew about the scientific literature on locus of attention, I was seeing very definite differences. So, one of the first tests I ever did was stick people on a little pitch shot over a bunker, and I would ask them to think about either the trajectory of the shot. So, I'd give them cues like, I want you to land the ball here, I want you to hit a high shot over this bunker. Or I used to find that was really bad for a lot of people. They would start to blade it or chunk it when visualizing that. So then I would ask them, well, focus on brushing the grass. And I would make all my coaching feedback about that. I would make them answer questions about it. I would video the contact with the grass, for example, with my slow motion camera. And then after each shot, I'd ask them, where do you think the club contacted the grass? And they might say, oh, I contacted it right where the ball was. And then we'd look at the camera and we'd see, no, actually, you hit 3 inches behind it. So it was really focusing their attention on this thing. And I would notice hugely different results with that. So, asking them to hit a high shot, they would blade it, top it, duff it in the bunker. Brushing the grass, on the other hand, they would start to get more over the bunker and better quality shots. So I didn't realize this was the difference between an external result focus versus an external, what I call external process focus, what they're controlling with the club and ball. Even in the scientific literature, they didn't have a lot on that. They lumped external and internal into two categories, right? So internal, and I tested this as well. I would ask people to hit chip shots, focusing on keeping your weight on your left side, which would help them hit the ground in the right place. And interestingly, so out of those three focuses, I would find focusing on weight left, lots of people couldn't do it. It was almost as if they couldn't control their bodies. So I'd ask them to keep their weight on their left side, and they would still go onto the back foot and try and scoop it. So I'm like, well, wait there. Why is this? What is so unique about this brush the grass focus? Because what I also noticed was when I gave them that focus, they did keep their weight on their left side. So I'm like, what's going on here? I'm asking them to keep their weight on their left side and they're not doing it. Yet when I ask them to brush the grass in the right place, all of a sudden they're keeping their weight on their left side. I'm like, wow, what kind of weird universe is this? But it all ties into locus of attention, self-organizing. It ties into the idea that intent, or what a player is trying to do with the golf ball or the tool, will create or influence their technique. So obviously when you ask a player hit a ball high over the bunker, Their brain says, how am I going to achieve this task? Let's go on the back foot and try and scoop it. Let's try and get under. That is the most instinctive way to hit that shot. And hence, it's a poor technique, unfortunately. That's why they didn't get good results. Whereas the focus of brush the ground in the right place, the brain says, how am I going to achieve this task? The task is brush the ground in the right place, and then automatically it figures out I got to keep my weight on my left side to do that without them knowing. So that's the idea of self-organization. Give a good quality intent, good quality task, good quality feedback relating to that, and the body will figure out a lot of it without you even having to consciously be aware of it. So yeah, I went into other different types of attention. So you've got the external focus, external result, which is, things like which way are you shaping the ball. So I know Annika Sorenstam liked to think of where a target was. Bubba Watson likes to think of the way he's shaping it. But for a lot of players, that's awful. When they think of the result, they hit it awful. Their technique goes to hell. Then you have external process. What is the club doing to the ball? This is the part that I have a lot of success with. I see as the biggest thing for golfers to improve. Then you have internal. This is where most of the golf industry is. What is your shoulder doing? It's thinking about a body piece effectively. What are your shoulders doing? How are you moving your weight? This class is internal. And all the research, and I didn't know at the time, but I was seeing it in my instruction, all the research shows that can be harmful for a lot of players. It's
Swing
probably
jail.
yeah, yeah. And again, it all comes down to when you do it, like our periodization concept, how much of it you do. Is it the right stuff? So, so there are flaws with this scientific research. So lots of the internal cues that they gave players, you could look at it and say, well, it's probably not relevant for that player. For example, they've done chipping studies where it's like focus on the arm swing versus focus on the target, and the target one wins. It's like, well, maybe the arm swing isn't the right cue for them. What level of instruction do these researchers have as well? Are they teaching them the correct arm movement? Or are they teaching them to keep the arms poker rigid, which I don't think is a good technique? So there are lots of flaws in the study, but the overall theme of the studies lines up with what I've seen in my practice and what I've seen with my data collection. I don't want to call what I do studies because it's just data collection. Then I added a couple of others, different types of focuses, like neutral was an interesting one. So I would have a lot of success. We talked about singing a song in our head while playing, or focusing on breathing, focusing on humming, focusing on counting during the routine. And I noticed that when people did that, their patterns tended to get very consistent. Now, not necessarily consistently good, but they tended to get consistent. So if there was a slicer, for example, and you got them to do a counting routine, they would slice everything. So I thought, well, okay, this might be valuable if you've got a good player. Say you got a player who comes to you and they're like, wow, I'm really good on the range. I can just hit these lasers over and over, but I get on the golf course and I get stuck in my own head. I start tweaking stuff too much. I get nervous. You think, okay, well, maybe a neutral focus would allow you to lower that interference and produce what your body can naturally produce. Neutral focuses, they've actually been studied, and that seems to go with the theme that if you get a good player with a neutral focus, they'll produce good outcomes. Whereas if you get a beginner with a neutral focus, it can actually harm them a little bit.
Yeah, that one makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
I've been very successful humming songs in my head while I putt the last few years because I'm just trying to shut everything off and let it happen. But I think I have fairly good putting stroke. I'm just trying to let it happen versus, yeah, as you said, a beginner might need a different cue. I love all this stuff. Obviously, it was a great part of your book, and I think getting back to one of my points earlier is that this is a way to approach golf in a more athletic way. This is how we do things in other sports. When you're playing catch or you're doing like you're trying to accomplish goals, external goals, as you said, and your body's self-organizing to achieve them. And we've talked about this on a ton of episodes, but this could be a huge unlock for a lot of golfers is that can you engage that athleticism and some of the external cues of trying to accomplish a task versus being so stuck in what your body is doing and thinking about it. And we always use this quote when you're when you stop playing golf swing and you start playing golf. Very hard to bridge that gap. But if you train a certain way, and I've been experimenting with so many of these with my chipping too. And sometimes some of them work. I'm like, oh, I think I figured out, I don't even look at the ball. I'm trying to hit that blade of grass in front of it. It works. And then that I've been trying all these tricks. Works great with my putting and my irons and driver, but struggle there. So I'm still searching for that cue for myself. But when you find it and it works and you can kind of stick with it, it can be quite powerful.
Yeah. And we can wire our brains differently as well. I think most golfers, especially most golf instructors, I speak to another guy who he can't conceive not having a technical thought when he's
Mm,
swinging, which is fine if you've wired your brain that way and you
yeah.
perform well. I'm not going to say to Bryson DeChambeau that he's wrong for thinking about internal rotation as he's swinging a golf club and winning these tournaments. So it's not necessarily wrong. But like you said, tapping into the idea of playing golf, not golf swing, tapping into that idea of instinct. So a little exercise I used to do with people who are overly technical is I would make them stand there ready without a ball. And then as they swing back, I would roll the ball towards them. So on the ground, basically rolling it as if I'm going to roll it between their legs. And then they would have to hit that ball as it's moving. In fact, there was a device created. It was super expensive, unfortunately. I think it was like $1,000, which did this. It basically would just you press a button and it would roll balls towards you at a certain cadence or randomly, and you would have to hit them as they're moving. And it was a way of training more athleticism, getting you out of your body. Other ways I've done this with people is I make them stand back as if they're in a pre-shot routine, and then they have to walk forwards and set up and hit almost instantly without that whole setting up and then going through their checklist in their head. They wouldn't have that time. Or even lining 10 balls up in a row and they have to hit one,
Yeah, I was gonna say
walk to the
that's the
next one,
one.
hit
Yeah,
another.
yeah,
And yeah, by the time they reach about the 10th ball, they're in this flow state, they're in this athleticism. So it's a good way of tapping into it. That might not be a neutral focus for some people. Actually, I classify neutral focuses as distractions. So a distraction might be I might force someone to count as they're swinging, or force someone to hum and focus on keeping the hum consistent. Or there's one, I think Pia Nilsson and Lynn Mary at Vision 54, they talk about having the tongue or putting Pringles in your mouth and making swings where you don't crunch the Pringles, or putting the tongue in the roof of your mouth and swinging like that. These are kind of neutral focuses. It
yeah.
distracts you from the
Exactly.
actual swing.
Well, that's why it works, as you said, with better players. Because if your body knows how to do it, you're trying to get at it your own way.
Yeah, yeah. The only problem with those things, as I said, that you're not going to really fix your lifelong slice by putting some Pringles in your mouth. You might have to think more technically for that.
Yes.
But interestingly, that where this first came about for me is I watched an instructor I worked with, Stephen Orr, learned a lot from him, and he had a shanker, and I was obviously looking at all the technical things this player had. And what Stephen did with them was I think he made him do a counting routine where he had to say back hit, which I think is it was a tennis book, The Inner Game, Galway.
Yeah, that was a very popular book. Still is.
Yeah. So the inner game of tennis, I think he did the inner game of golf as well. So the
He
whole
did.
back hit, again, a neutral focus, distraction.
That's why I love the tour tempo beats. Dun,
Yeah. Yeah. It's a neutral
start,
focus as well.
top, hit.
Yeah.
Love them.
Yeah. And so the interesting thing, when this player was interviewed, like, what are you thinking of? That player was thinking of, don't shank it.
Yeah.
So he'd stand over it thinking, I don't want to shank it. I don't want to shank it. And he would inevitably
Oh, this
shank it.
game. This
So
game is
somewhere
so
there was this kind
horrible.
of cross wiring in his brain. Whereas when he thought that, when he was thinking, don't shank it, it would bring about the shank. I would argue now that that player just didn't have the tools, the correct toolbox available to him. But as I said, Stephen with this thing did the back hit exercise, and it basically distracted his mind from thinking, "Don't shank it." It forced him to focus all his attention on back hit, so he couldn't think of that thing, and his shank disappeared in that session. I think for months after as well. I don't know how he is now, but it was just an interesting thing to me that, oh, this is a real unique way of improving a player's mechanics and improving the outcome. The final locus of attention that I identified was transcendental. I call it transcendental, outside of your body, kind of like going above
This
yourself and
is
beyond
where you
yourself.
achieve nirvana on the course, and you
Enlightenment,
have an
yeah.
outer body experience.
And basically, I listened to some interview with Tiger where he was talking about, I pull the club out of the bag. I remember looking and visualizing the shot, and then I remember pulling the club out of the bag, and then it's like a blank, nothing happened, just blackout almost. And then all of a sudden the ball lands and he comes back into play. So, some may call this the zone, right? And I think there are two different interpretations of the zone. One of them would be you are so focused on something that you just get absorbed into that and everything else disappears, which is great. I believe that's a part of the zone as well. But there are definite examples of zone like focuses where you're not focused on anything necessarily. I've been hitting balls sometimes and my I just hit this kind of rhythm. Or the example I give to people is when you drive to work sometimes and you arrive at work and you're like, oh my God, did I black out during that? I don't even remember doing it. Yet we stop at red lights, we follow the road rules, it's all unconscious behavior. And so that is what I call transcendental focus. And it's a weird one because the more you try and get into it, the less you're likely to get in there. But the reason why I identified it for people is because when it happens, don't necessarily pull yourself out of it. I used to see that as a mistake. If I was having a round of golf, for example, and I was playing well, and then I go, oh God, I wasn't even focusing for the last few holes. Now my score is good. I've got to focus really hard for the next few, and inevitably I'd screw up. So what I learned is that, oh no, if you're in this transcendental state, if you're not focusing on playing well, stick with that. Don't pull yourself out of it. But also identified how to get into that state more often is through rhythms help. So, when you rock a baby to sleep or something like that, these rhythms, I think, are very natural for us. Or another example is if you're doing say you're signing something over and over again. Say you have to sign 100 times, and next sheet, sign. Or you've done a task like that that's very repetitive and you get into a rhythm with it. That's when we enter this transcendental state. Lots of shift workers or factory workers find their work quite pleasurable. And you think, looking at them, oh, this is going to be horrible. They're just doing the same thing over and over, but they actually report quite high levels of happiness with their job because they're entering this flow state a lot of the time. They just get very good at this thing. So rhythms can help us, so we can create rhythms in our routine. That's why you see all waggling a lot of the time, back and forth movements, consistent
It's
timings of
it's
routines.
definitely a real thing. Talking with a lot of tournament golfers, they describe the way they pull the club out of the bag, how many steps they take on the tee box, and like the rhythm of which they walk. And everyone has their own unique signature, but it's once you start like really looking for it and understanding it, it's there.
Yeah.
And I've had to work very hard on that myself in tournament play, but it creates like familiarity and allows you to hopefully go into that state, as you said. And the most important thing, also what you said, is feeling like you need golfers love to feel like they have to be in control of things. So as you said, when you are playing well and you snap back out, you're like, oh no, I got 6 holes left and I don't want to blow this. Now I've got to guide everything into the clubhouse, and that's when trouble starts. Rather than what's the hardest thing in golf is just let's just let it happen and let's just see what happens, and then we'll deal
Learn
with
to
it
give up.
afterwards. Yeah,
Learn to
you
give
get,
up
yeah,
control to gain control.
it really is unbelievable in golf. Like the less you squeeze, the more control you get. It's a very counterintuitive game in many, 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 many ways.
Like the example I use, sometimes you'll play the front nine, you won't be incredibly focused, but then when you tot up the score on the front nine, you're like, oh,
Yeah,
I'm playing really well, I better
yeah,
focus. And then you
yeah,
pull yourself out of that zone and play poorly. Or the reverse can happen as well. You can have start out the round, try, I got to really focus hard, and you get to the front nine and you're like, oh my God,
yeah.
this is,
That's
I'm
why
so
a lot
many
of
over par.
players. Yep, a lot
Just
of
gonna
players play
give
better
up
on
and
the
just
bag.
play.
Yep,
Yeah,
they
exactly.
finally
So
just like they let, and I still do this to some extent in many rounds where I'm like, yeah, I'll just exhale now, and then okay, now we can do it.
hard to do, yeah. Especially when the pressure's on you in a tournament. It's hard to just
That's
go in and say,
so
all right, I'm going
hard.
to try and relax and give up that control.
Yeah, it's sometimes you just can't do it. On
I
some
think
days it's
evolutionary, right? When we feel like there's danger,
yeah.
we are more alert, there's more anxiety, there's more tension because we're like, right, I got to be ready, I got to change, I got to be able to adapt. And that thing that might have made us survive when we were in caveman times is probably the thing that makes us play poor golf under pressure right now.
Yeah, I and that's why I do enjoy tournament golf a lot when I can get into the state that I like because it feels good to know I can do that when there's perceived pressure. But there's still plenty of times, as I said, where I feel that fight or flight thing literally coming in where I'm like, I feel like I'm in danger here while I'm just playing golf. Like, and I have to snap myself out, like, calm down. Like, dude, this is not that big of a deal.
Yeah, I'm too much of a caveman. I can't turn my inner caveman off, unfortunately. Yeah, so this transcendental focus, rhythms help. Like I said, the rhythm of your consistency as well. If things are consistent, if you drive the same route to work every day, then that's going to help you enter this zone-like state more often. If you have to take a different route because there's road work or something like that, that can put you out a little bit, or even your routine of your day, right? If you wake up and you're a little late with the alarm, it kind of affects the rest of your day. You can't get in this relaxed state. But the third thing is just a belief that it's okay to give up control. You know, when I go back to my younger days, I didn't know that that was the way. I was like, oh, you can play good golf without grinding yourself
To a pulp.
mentally. You can just relax and just let stuff happen, and good shots will happen as well. That wasn't available to me as a kid. I thought you had to be consciously in control of everything, every movement, every arm position, you had to try really hard. And that's just not always the case. This belief that this relaxed flow state can be more optimal for many helps us get into it or helps us not pull ourselves out of it. The other thing I think is interesting how these things tie in. I've found I'm able to get into a flow state better because I've practiced a lot of neutral focuses. So, for example, the counting routine, if people don't know, that's where I'm standing back and then when I step forward to walk towards the ball, I start counting. So, like 1, 2, 3 with each step. And as I set in, I look at the target on 6, bring my eyes back on 7, swing back on 8, and hit on 9. So it has all those elements. It has a consistency to it because I'm constantly doing the same thing, hitting back on the same numbers. And it has a rhythm to it as well because I actually count to the beat of a metronome. And it also helps me, it's a neutral focus because it focuses my mind so much on the counting of the beats that I can't think of anything like swing or pressure or oh, there's water left. I can't think of that because I'm so focused on the beats. So I've often used that under pressure, and the more I've used that as a drill, the more I've able to not need it, just enter this flow state automatically. So yeah, there are 5 different types of attention: internal, external process, external performance, that's the outcome, neutral, and transcendental. I'm sure there are more variants of those as well, but those are 5 that I identified in the book.
All right, was that it?
Yeah, we can call it. We can call it it.
It's like, is there more? Read the book.
Oh yeah, that was one, two,
That was
three,
5.
4. That was 5 topics out of I think I identified like 25 the other day that were in the book. So if you get the book, you're going to get something from it. Trust me. So the practice
Yes,
manual,
it's a
the
great
ultimate guide
book.
for golfers. Thanks for allowing me to plug John on this podcast. Next
Well,
one you can do.
I don't think you plugged. I think you actually like gave away a ton of valuable information for free from something you actually charge money for. So I hope people support you and buy the book and get more out of it. So I don't view that as a plug. Plug would just being like, buy my book, buy my book, buy my book, and then nothing else.
Cool. Anything to add, John, or should we
No, other than like
cut and
the
run?
book is fantastic. It definitely shaped some of the way I think about golf and a lot of other people think about golf. And it kind of identified things that maybe I had like, sometimes you like maybe figured something out in golf, but you can't quite put your finger on it. So like the locus of attention that like I was like,
Yeah.
oh, that's it. Like it gave like I'm like, that's what I've been now I could do more of this. So there's a lot of stuff in there where I think that's why you and I first connected. I was like, man, this is so in line with like how I view the game, and it gave a lot of specificity to it and substance and just it was great. So yes, buy the book. thanks for sharing all that. And I think we'll call it an episode there, right?
Yeah, I think so. So Amazon, the practice manual, the ultimate guide for golfers, and obviously you can, while you're there, put John's book
I
in the
think
cart as
Amazon
well and
at
get
this
that.
point, I think so many people have bought the book that Amazon like recommends them together.
But yeah, I'm pretty sure of that.
Yeah. So thanks to everyone who has purchased both of our books. We're self published authors. So you can feel good that most of the money, well, not
It
most
helps
of it.
feed us.
Yeah. Well, a lot of it's going to Amazon. I'm happy to give it to them, to be quite honest with you, because they help distribute the book quite well. But we don't have a publishing house to deal with. So Adam and I, that's the best way you can support our content so we can keep doing these free podcasts, buy our books. We have digital courses and other stuff. But yeah, we're grateful to everyone who listens and fill out our user survey. So we'll cover more topics that are important to you. Link is in the show notes, and we'll see you next time with a new episode.